Despite lifting weights for a long time and essentially following bodybuilder workout routines for aesthetic purposes, I've never been a calorie tracker. I've always just eaten I what they tend to refer to as intuitively. Although from my perspective, it's just eating like a normal person. For those of you who don't, know too much about this, bodybuilders in particular are notorious for tracking their calories and their macronutrients throughout the course of a day. So, they've had whatever 3,000 calories for the day, 300 grams of it was carbs, 100 grams was fat, 200 grams were protein, however the math works out. And there are certain goals nested in there. You want to make sure, in particular, you have enough protein throughout the day, that you're not overdoing it on fats, that kind of stuff. But I've never done any of that. I've never been one to track my calories or macros. I didn't come up that way. I was an athlete throughout my younger life, but not for bodybuilding. So I just never learned or made that part of my life. I decided to give that a whirl with the help of an app. So over the course of the last, couple months now, I have been tracking my calories. And again, it's not like I wasn't familiar with how to do this, weighing food. I'm not going to go through all that. The real purpose of this is to talk about the app that I started using called Macrofactor. Just to be clear, this isn't like some kind of sponsored thing or whatever. It's just so happens to be what I ended up using. There's some people behind this. The way that I bumped into it was through a guy named Jeff Nippard. I'll link to his YouTube channel. That's typically where I've seen his work. There are many apps that one could choose on the App Store to track calories. One of the most used ones, I believe, is called MyFitnessPal. I have downloaded and opened that in the past and messed around a little bit. Wasn't really my thing. There are some things that make Macrofactor unique, or at least unique across the things that I have done before. Most notably, it's backed by a bunch of research that will adjust your nutrition based on what your plan is. And it's not so it's always important with this sort of thing to kind of define your goals, right? Goals for me, I have been for several years now following bulk and cut cycles of eating throughout the year. Typically, or at least, we'll take last year. Last year, I think I bulked for about 8 months, cut for the other remaining 4. That was sort of the dynamic. So if you're just straight trying to lose weight, that's a different type of goal. If you are just straight trying to gain weight or just stay where you are, those are all things that this can handle. But for my purposes, I started using this app right toward the tail end of a maintenance phase, moving into a bulk. One of the things I've liked about this is that it's more gradual. It seems to be much more intentional about things. It'd be very easy. Typically, if you go and talk to someone and they say, "Oh, how do you bulk?" Well, just add 500 calories to your diet. Well, you don't necessarily want to make that switch overnight, and this app accommodates for that. It kind of gradually builds you up. Each week you kind of do a check-in. It'll adjust your calories, sometimes just a little, sometimes it'll swing it by a little bit more. But I like that piece of things where it's giving you kind of this range, and you can see it working week after week based on your real data. So based on you weigh in every morning. You should really be doing that anyway if you're doing this sort of thing. But between your weigh-in data and your eating data that you log throughout the course of the day, it will adjust your plan accordingly. So there's some things I like about this app, and there's some things I think need some improvement. It is a relatively new app, I believe. So you can take my feedback with a grain of salt, but some of the stuff I do like, again, the plans, the way that it sets up the plans, and you can tell it's using data in the most effective way that it knows how to try to adjust how you should eat throughout the course of your week. It also is pretty accommodating if you miss some days along the way. I try not to, but there are days that, for one reason or another, it just doesn't make any sense that day to log my food. That's rare, or it has been rare since I've started using it, but it's still, it happens and the app will accommodate for that. It doesn't just bottom out for the week and not know what to do with that. So that's been useful. It has a food scanner in it, so if you're eating food that has come primarily in packages with barcodes, you can scan it. It'll just kind of load the stuff over. It has a way to search things up. It does a pretty good job at remembering your history from day to day. So if you often eat the same things, which I tend to, it's pretty easy to pull that up from the day before. It feels now it is a there's a barrier to entry of paying. So it's not a free app in that I think you can try it for like 7 days or something like that. But ultimately, you do need to pay to use this. And I think that payment is worth it. It does feel like a premium app, a premium product above and beyond what you can get with a lot of the free apps, like MyFitnessPal, for instance. And I thought that the price was very reasonable. I don't remember what it was off the top of my head. I think it was like, I don't know, 50 or $60 for 6 months or something. It wasn't too bad, and you do feel, or I feel like I'm getting a much more rich experience, and it's much more of a nutrition home base for me than just any old food logging app. The other big thing to like about this app is the data. It really does go out of its way to put a lot of different data visualizations in front of you, so you really have a pretty good picture. How much you've eaten that day, what's remaining, what are your macros, how is it tracking over time, how does it compare to your energy expenditure, which I'm not 100% sure how it calculates, but whatever. It puts a lot of data in front of you. And just based on my experience, having been, doing this more intuitively for years, it did reaffirm to me that generally speaking, I knew what I was doing. Like, I didn't see anything so outlandishly crazy that I was like, whoa, what is that? There are some things that I think need some improvement, and maybe some of this will come with time. I said there's, food tracking and stuff, or the scanning and stuff. I think the food database leaves a lot to be desired. A lot of the scanning works pretty good, but I'm surprised when I go to look for something very generic, like just a basic food, that there aren't many. The app kind of splits up the food choices between common foods, branded foods. Like, so, if you're eating a particular brand of food, that's one category versus if it's just it's like having an apple versus an apple from a particular company. I am surprised how lacking the common foods are. It seems like I should be able to search up some basic stuff. Like, I should be able to search for like meatball or something and not have to choose a particular brand. Because I think that there is and I know that not all meatball's the same and whatever, but if you don't know the specific type of meatball that you are eating, you have to pick sort of a branded one, and they might be different from one another, and that's not really accurate. It seems to me you could create kind of like, what is an average meatball, and make that a common food. As an aside, I don't know offhand if meatball is listed as a common food. I'm just using it as an example. There are other things I've run into where I just type in a basic type of food, and there is no option to choose other than ones that have a brand associated with them, which I don't think is great. I think some of the user experience stuff in the app is clunky. Again, it's a premium product and it's a very data-driven product, so there's a lot of options and buttons and checkboxes, and the interface can get a little complicated. I'm okay with complicated, but there's certain things where you'll be entering food and you think hitting a button like log food is going to take you back to a certain interface or a certain screen, but instead it just pops the food in and then takes you to the day view. There's just some weird things with the flow of buttons and controls that sometimes it does stuff that I don't expect. And then I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? Not the biggest deal in the world. Again, it's kind of a dense interface, and I think they do a pretty good job at balancing that. But there are some things that they could probably work on there, particularly around button naming and button options. Another thing that could be improved, it's very difficult to track alcohol consumption. Now, a couple things. First of all, it's on their roadmap. Now, to what capacity it's on the roadmap, I don't know. They do say they're going to create this item or this feature or expand it or whatever. I don't know how they're going to do that exactly, but as of right now, it's very difficult to track alcohol with any kind of veracity. Even from a branded alcohol perspective, there's not a lot of options, let alone if you, like me, tend to go to like things like craft breweries, and they don't have any concept of that at all. At the very least, I think it would be great to see some basic alcohol consumption categories. Typically, when I think about consuming alcohol, there's a few categories in my head. Is it a shot? That's going to be around 100 calories if it's straight liquor. Is it a beer? It's going to be like around 200 to 250 calories if it's a craft beer. Is it a light beer? Then it's probably like 100 to 150 calories. Is it a big fruity drink? Well, then it's probably 300 plus, right? And I kind of that's how I section things off in my brain when I'm thinking about calories and alcohol. It's like you've got shots, light beers, heavier beers, and then, big fruity drinks filled with lots of sugar. Even basic categories like that, to have some concept of tracking what you're doing would be nice. What I end up doing instead is if I have some drinks for a day, I'll just put in a big batch at one time. I'll just say like, oh, there was like 1,500 assorted calories. But that kind of misses how much alcohol might be in there or any of the macros. So it's not kind of a blunt method. It gives me the calories, but not anything other than the calories. And again, I don't drink tons, but on the days that I do drink, it would be nice to have something here that would be a little bit easier. Finally, I would say that one of the weaker parts of the app is the AI entry. It's pretty dumb AI. I feel like there's a lot better in today's world. We've come to expect a lot more out of AI than this offers. It's pretty dumb entry. For instance, if I've gone there and I've said, chicken meatballs with a dark sauce. And it's just very blunt brute force. It comes back to the app and sometimes it will list chicken. It'll give me like chicken, and if I can find some sort of sauce, and it just kind of shoves those in. It doesn't do a good job at breaking a description of a food down, of like a complex meal. Like if you can't just write, I had some mashed potatoes and some chicken and I had some sauce on it and some green beans, give me an average. And I know that's not a great description, but I feel like I should be able to do better with that than it does. What I find myself doing a lot, particularly when I go out to eat, right? Because if you go out to eat, you really don't know what's in that food unless some places will have some calories and macros listed. But if you're at like a nice restaurant or something, they don't have any of that. So what I end up doing is taking a picture of the best angle I can kind of find of the plate of food I'm going to eat. I come back later, upload that picture into ChatGPT, and kind of interrogate ChatGPT to give me a ballpark of what might be in it. I've checked that against some known quantities of food. I find it to be reasonably accurate. It's at least in the ballpark. And at the end of the day, all of this calorie and macro tracking is always going to be ballpark. There's always margin for error. If you get to the end of your day and your app says you've eaten 2,700 calories and you think you've eaten exactly 2,700 calories, you're out of your mind. There's all kinds of margin of error that can happen here. So I find that my workflow of grabbing a picture, throwing it into a more advanced AI, asking for some analysis around it, including I'll ask it about approximately how much weight do you think this is in grams? What do you think's inside of it? Give me an approximate calories and macros and stuff. And it comes back with what it can do, and I think it does pretty well. It seems like reasonable numbers, generally speaking. So a feature that's closer to that, where you could snap a picture of the food and ask it a few questions, might be good. Clearly, that sort of technology exists, but what it has in the app is virtually useless from my point of view. So anyway, overall, I've found this. I've been successful, and I've done a number of things with this. Over the last, again, couple months, I've been able to track my food at home fairly easily. I've been able to get some ballpark when I eat out. I've been able to compensate for sort of the lack of alcohol tracking the best that I can, at least in estimates. And overall, it has given me a pretty clear picture, I think, or a pretty accurate picture of where I'm going, and it helps adjust my plan as I go. And I'm going to keep using it. It hasn't been that bad. The biggest issue is usually when you make a dinner and you're running around scanning 50,000 barcodes while your family waits for you to sit down. Outside of that, which is just an inconvenience, but that's just how these things work. So overall, if you're looking for something to track calories, macros, if you're trying to diet, if you're trying to do whatever, check it out. I think it's as far as the ones that I've used throughout the years, or at least tried, I think this is a pretty good one, and I like its approach to most things.